All right, MJ Lee in Chappaqua, New York. Thanks so much. Let's discuss with House Oversight Committee Democrat Congressman Suha Subramaniam of Virginia. Congressman, what did you ask former Secretary of State Clinton in today's deposition, and what was the mood like in the room?
Well, we wanted to establish basically the written testimony that she'd given us, which is that she had never met Jeffrey Epstein and that she didn't have any sort of relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. And that was clear from the testimony. I mean, we would like the transcript of the testimony to be released within 24 hours, because the reality is she ran circles around the Republicans the entire time. And I mean, it's still going, and she's answering every single question being asked. But the reality is we should be interviewing people who actually had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, who knew the guy, who at least met the guy and know about his crimes. There's so many people in the files, and Hillary Clinton is not someone we should be focusing on right now. But what's also interesting is there's about 10 or 11 Republicans here. There were 0 Republicans from the committee who came to Les Wexner's testimony in Ohio a couple of weeks ago. And so I think that's very telling that rather than getting to the truth by focusing on people like Wexner, we're making this a political clown show by talking to Secretary Clinton.
Tell us about the moment that you found out that your Republican colleague Lauren Boebert had taken photographs and passed them on to right-wing influencers of Hillary Clinton during the deposition.
Yeah, this is a closed-door deposition. This isn't a family vacation. I don't know why she's secretly snapping photos. I think Secretary Clinton was right to be angry about it. She demanded that if you're going to snap photos privately, why not let the entire media in? That was their demand, actually, to make up for it. But again, the Republicans refused to do that. But I think they wanted a public testimony all along. So when Republicans refuse that, why are you then secretly snapping photos? But, again, the reality is this is a political sideshow. This did not help our investigation at all. What would help our investigation is releasing the 2.5 million files that Trump is withholding, having President Trump himself come before us, and certainly at least Secretary Lutnick come before us to answer questions under oath.
Do you agree with the top Democrat on the committee, Robert Garcia, that the press should be allowed to watch the hearing?
Absolutely. I wish the press could have come in and just watched the whole thing. I think what they would have seen and what the American public would have seen is basically Republicans embarrassing themselves. Some of the questions had nothing to do with Epstein and Maxwell and our investigation, and were very much irrelevant to it. And so, again, this was perhaps part of the plan, was to try to sort of shift the blame and shift the attention from Trump and the Republicans to a Democrat like Hillary Clinton. But the reality is that she simply never met the guy, and it was a waste of our time.
Is it true that some of the questions were about Pizzagate and about UFOs?
I hope that the transcript will be released within 24 hours. I'm not allowed to say specifics about it, but I will just say that the transcript will be very revealing about that.
What do you want to ask former President Bill Clinton tomorrow?
Well, President Clinton is in the files. He's got several pictures of himself there. And so I'd like to know what the context of those photos were. I'd like to know why he used Epstein's plane and Epstein's visits to the White House as well, and just any involvement or knowledge of Epstein's crimes. I do think that would be more productive than talking to Secretary Clinton. Again, I look back to what he has given us as far as a sworn statement. He says he didn't have any knowledge of his crimes and that other than use of his plane, he didn't have a close relationship. But we're going to ask him those hard questions, too.
In regard to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, you have said that the Trump administration is fighting our push for justice at every step with a cover-up. Is the Oversight Committee prepared to take any action on this?
Well, certainly I am, and other Democrats on the committee are, and we're hoping this can be bipartisan. But the reality is this administration has violated the law multiple times now. And now, we have pretty clear indications that they're withholding files that make President Trump look bad, in addition to many other files that are very revealing and would be helpful to our investigation. And so we need Republicans on the committee and in Congress to hold this administration accountable. They've refused to do so on this. And so we're going to continue pushing.
Is there evidence in the files that there are, not just evidence, is there credible evidence, actionable evidence in the files that there are powerful people. I'm not talking about lower level people who worked for Epstein or whatever, but powerful people who availed themselves of underage girls and victims of sex trafficking. I mean, are there people who should be arrested? Are there people who should be investigated by the FBI?
I don't have all the files, but if I did, I'd be able to answer that question better. That's part of the problem, is that we don't have all the files. From what we have, I haven't seen enough yet, but I would say that, we have arrests happening in Europe, right? We have arrests, we have people losing their board seats and losing their titles and jobs. And these are very rich and powerful people, CEOs of companies. But certainly I would like for law enforcement and the Department of Justice to do its job and investigate further, talk to people, try to find more evidence, release all of the evidence you do have to the public. But that's not what's happening right now. While other countries are moving forward with arrests, we in the United States are sitting back and begging and pleading with the Department of Justice to release the files. So I think that's wrong.
Democratic Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, sir. Coming up on The Lead, I'm going to talk with a Republican on the House Oversight Committee to get his take on today's testimony and the leaked photo and the deposition coming tomorrow with former President